Don't forget to subscribe. Enjoy your viewing.
I had never imagined that betrayal could arrive so quietly, so stealthily, until the day my world turned upside down. My name is Michael, and for nearly a decade I believed that the love and trust one shared with Rebecca was unassailable. Yet, in the quiet corners of our lives, a deception was unfurling, a betrayal that would shatter the very foundation of everything I held dear. It began with small, easily dismissed anomalies. At first, it was the extra hours at work that Rebecca attributed to a new project. Then came the whispers of late-night phone calls, hushed conversations she brushed off with an apology and a promise to explain later. I told myself it was just the busy pace of life, the pressures of modern relationships. But as time passed, the subtle discrepancies grew into glaring inconsistencies that I could no longer ignore. One fateful evening, after returning home earlier than usual, I found our living room unnervingly silent. There, on the coffee table, lay a silk scarf, a color and texture that did not match any of mine. The sight of it triggered a cascade of thoughts that I desperately tried to silence. Every shared memory, every gentle laugh between us, suddenly appeared tainted by secrets and lies. My heart pounded with a mix of dread and disbelief as I slowly realized that the love I had once celebrated was being undermined by betrayal. In the days that followed, I sought answers in every corner of our shared existence. I searched for clues in the faded photographs on our walls, the mementos of happier times. Each discovery, no matter how small, deepened the chasm of suspicion. The warmth in Rebecca's eyes had grown distant, her laughter hollow, as if she carried a secret too burdensome to share. And in every whispered excuse, I detected the unmistakable timbre of guilt. The truth, when it finally revealed itself, was a crushing blow. I discovered a series of intimate messages on her phone, each one a dagger to my already wounded heart. The words painted a vivid picture of a clandestine affair with a man I had never even heard her mention. In that moment, I felt as though the ground beneath me had crumbled, leaving me suspended in a nightmare of my own making. I remember the overwhelming sensation of isolation that followed, a loneliness so profound it drowned out even the echo of my own thoughts. Confronting Rebecca was the hardest thing I have ever done. With trembling hands and a voice choked by anguish, I asked her to explain the inexcusable. Her response was a series of halting admissions, each more detached than the last. She spoke of a loneliness I was blind to, of desires unfulfilled in our marriage, as though our years together had been nothing more than a chapter in her life that she wished to close. Her words, rather than mending the breach, only deepened the wound, a wound that now festered with betrayal and regret. I spent long nights questioning every choice, every smile, every tender moment that I had once taken for granted. The realization that I had been living a lie was as bitter as it was paralyzing. I felt betrayed not only by the woman I loved but by the very notion of trust itself. Each memory was now a painful reminder that love, when it falters, can leave nothing but shards of disappointment scattered across a once beautiful life. Yet even as the truth sank in, I found myself unable to let go of the remnants of what we had built together. The house we shared, the dreams we once nurtured, all now served as cruel reminders of a future that would never be. I wandered through empty rooms, each one echoing with laughter from a time that felt like a distant dream. In every quiet corner, I searched for a trace of the love that had once defined my existence, only to find that it had been irreversibly tainted. In my solitude, I began to write, to chronicle my pain, to capture the fleeting moments of joy that still haunted the edges of my memories. Every word I penned was a desperate attempt to reconcile the man I thought I was with the man now forced to face a harsh and unforgiving truth. The act of writing became both a salve for my aching heart and a record of a love that was lost to betrayal. I stand now at a crossroads, burdened by the weight of shattered trust and wounded pride. The future appears uncertain, cloaked in the darkness of betrayal, yet within that darkness, I sense the faint stirrings of a new beginning. I know that the road to healing will be long and strewn with painful reminders of what once was, but I also believe that from the ruins of this broken bond, I might one day rise anew. As I reflect on the events that have irrevocably altered my life, I cannot help but feel that I have been forced to confront not only the betrayal of a partner but the fragility of my own heart. Every step I take now is measured against the painful lessons of the past, each one a reminder that trust is not given lightly, and once broken, it may never be fully restored. The bitter taste of betrayal lingers, a constant companion on a journey I never chose to embark upon. Yet, even in the midst of despair, I find a spark of determination. I am resolved to reclaim the parts of me that have been lost to this betrayal, to forge a new identity from the remnants of a shattered love. Though the road ahead is uncertain and fraught with challenges, I am prepared to face the future with an honest acknowledgement of the pain that has defined these recent months. For in the end, it is only by confronting the darkest parts of our souls that we can hope to discover the light that lies beyond. I write these words as both a confession and a farewell to the past, a past that can no longer sustain the fragile illusion of what once was. The story of my love for Rebecca is one marked by joy and sorrow, but it has now reached an impasse from which there is no return. With a heart heavy with regret and resolve, I stand ready to step away from the ruins of our shared life, even as the bitter taste of betrayal forever lingers on my tongue. In the weeks following the devastating confrontation, I found myself immersed in a world of silence and reflection. The life I once shared with Rebecca had dissolved into fragments of memories that haunted every corner of my existence. I, Michael, was left alone to confront the lingering echoes of a love that had been brutally shattered by betrayal. Every room in the house, once filled with warmth and laughter, now bore the cold imprint of loneliness, and each day unfolded as a slow march through grief. Mornings arrived with a quiet inevitability, the pale light of dawn seeping through dusty windows. I would sit at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair where Rebecca had once sat, my mind swirling with thoughts of what had been lost. The familiar aroma of coffee, once a comfort, now carried the bitter tang of regret. Each sip reminded me of happier times, when our shared smiles and whispered dreams painted the future in vivid hues. Now, the future lay in ruins, replaced by a persistent emptiness that I could neither escape nor fully comprehend. Desperate to find solace, I began retracing the steps of our shared past. I drove aimlessly through our old neighborhood, where every street corner and park bench held a piece of our history. I returned to the quaint cafe where we spent lazy afternoons, laughing over coffee and exchanging secrets that felt sacred at the time. The bookstore we frequented, with its labyrinth of shelves and dusty tomes, echoed with the quiet conversations we once enjoyed. In these familiar places, I discovered a bittersweet mixture of comfort and pain, a reminder that even as life moved forward, the past remained stubbornly tethered to my heart. The nights, however, were the most relentless. When darkness fell, the silence of the empty house was overwhelming, and every shadow in the dim light seemed to whisper remnants of our lost love. I would wander the halls as if chasing ghosts that vanished as soon as I reached out. The quiet was both a balm and a torment, offering moments of introspection that transformed into long hours of solitary lamentation. In those moments, I questioned not only the integrity of our relationship but also the very nature of trust and the fragility of the human heart. In my search for understanding, I sought refuge in relics of our past. In the attic, I discovered boxes filled with mementos, birthday cards adorned with heartfelt messages, faded photographs capturing smiles from brighter days, and ticket stubs from concerts and movies that once symbolized our dreams. Each artifact stirred a flood of emotions, a blend of nostalgia and sorrow that made me wonder if clinging to these remnants was an act of remembrance or a chain binding me to a painful history. The more I held on to these fragments, the more I risked losing myself in a past that no longer existed. In the midst of this inner turmoil, I turned to writing. Late at night, as the world around me slept, I sat at my desk and poured my heart onto paper. With every word, I tried to capture the raw essence of my despair and the bittersweet beauty of what had once been. Writing became a lifeline, a way to process the avalanche of emotions threatening to overwhelm me and a desperate attempt to stitch together the torn fabric of my heart. Through the act of writing, I sought to reconcile the man I was with the man I had become, a man forged by betrayal and loss yet determined to salvage a shred of hope from the ruins. Slowly, over days that bled into weeks, a painful transformation began. I realized that healing was not about erasing the past but learning to live with it. The sting of betrayal was a permanent scar, a reminder of the fragile nature of trust, yet it also held the seeds of growth. I began taking long, solitary walks. The steady rhythm of my footsteps on the pavement served as a quiet meditation on the transient nature of sorrow. The crisp air and the gentle murmur of life outside offered a counterpoint to the chaos within me. Every step was an act of defiance, a small but significant refusal to let grief dictate the rest of my days. During these walks, I encountered subtle signs of resilience in the faces of strangers. A kind smile exchanged on a busy street, the fleeting warmth of a shared greeting, or even the silent acknowledgement of pain in another's eyes reminded me that life continued despite loss. These brief, tender moments were like sparks of light in the darkness, suggesting that perhaps I, too, could emerge from this abyss, scarred, yes, but not entirely defeated. Each of these encounters, though ephemeral, reinforced my determination to seek a future beyond the devastation of the past. Yet, no matter how far I walked or how deeply I tried to rebuild, the shadow of Rebecca's betrayal lurked in every corner. Every familiar sound, a creak in the floor, the rustle of leaves in the wind, the soft hum of a distant conversation, could suddenly summon memories of her and the life we once shared. The omnipresent echo of her absence served as a constant, almost cruel reminder that while I might move forward, the scars of betrayal would forever be etched in my soul. In the stillness of those long, reflective nights, I resolved to rebuild not what was lost but myself. I began to understand that the journey toward healing was as much about rediscovering who I truly was as it was about forgiving the past. The process was slow and fraught with setbacks, yet every small victory, each moment of unexpected laughter, every genuine connection with another soul, became a stepping stone toward reclaiming my life. I started to see that my future did not have to be defined by the pain of yesterday, but could be a canvas for new beginnings, painted with the resilience of a wounded yet unbroken spirit. Now, as I write these words, I stand at the threshold of a new chapter, a chapter where the echoes of the past, though still audible, no longer dictate the rhythm of my heart. I have learned that while the pain of betrayal may never vanish entirely, it can transform into a source of strength if I allow it. With each new dawn, I endeavor to let go of the chains of memory, however slowly, and to embrace the possibility of renewal. In this quiet, contemplative state, I have come to realize that the wound of betrayal is both a burden and a teacher. It has forced me to confront the deepest recesses of my soul, to question the very nature of love and trust, and to acknowledge that even in the bleakest moments, there exists a glimmer of hope. As I step tentatively into the unknown, I carry with me the hard-earned lessons of the past and a cautious optimism that, despite everything, a better tomorrow awaits. Thus, with a heart heavy yet determined, I take my next step forward. The road ahead is uncertain and will undoubtedly be marred by remnants of old pain, but I am resolved to forge a future defined not by the echoes of what once was, but by the promise of what might be. Even if the memory of Rebecca and the betrayal we endured continue to whisper in the corridors of my mind, I now choose to listen instead to the call of a new beginning, a call that promises healing, growth, and, ultimately, a measure of peace. I felt a transformation stirring inside me, a simmering fire that refused to be quenched by sorrow or resignation. In the weeks following my solitary wanderings and long nights of introspection, I realized that the betrayal had not only shattered my trust but ignited a fierce resolve to reclaim my life. My name is Michael, and I was determined not to let the echoes of Rebecca's deception define me any longer. Instead, I would use the burning intensity of my anger to forge a new path, a path toward healing, redemption, and self-respect. Every day brought memories that both tormented and propelled me forward. I was no longer the man who clung to a past of illusions, I had awakened to a painful clarity. The endless hours spent writing in my journal, the solitary walks through rain-soaked streets, and the quiet moments of reflection had scarred me deeply, yet they had also kindled a resolve to transform that pain into strength. I began to view my suffering as the crucible in which a new, more resilient self would be forged. I refused to allow myself to be defined solely by betrayal. Instead of seeking revenge, I chose to channel my anger into rebuilding my identity. Each day became an opportunity to redefine who I was, to cast off the layers of deceit that had once enshrouded me. I pushed myself to new limits, embracing challenges that forced me to confront my vulnerabilities. Long-distance running became my ritual, a way to measure my progress not in miles alone, but in the gradual lightening of a burdened heart. With every stride, I felt a measure of liberation, as though the physical exertion was washing away the remnants of betrayal. In the midst of this personal transformation, I met David at a local gym. Like me, he had known the sting of deep betrayal and carried his own scars from a painful past. Our conversations were raw and unfiltered, a mutual exchange of stories about loss, regret, and the slow, painful road to healing. David's resilience and quiet determination inspired me, and in our shared vulnerability, I discovered that I was not alone. His encouragement helped me see that there was power in our scars. They were not just reminders of pain but evidence of our capacity to overcome it. Yet even as I embarked on this journey of self-discovery, the memory of Rebecca's betrayal lingered like a dark shadow. Every time I closed my eyes, the images of her clandestine meetings and whispered lies resurfaced with vivid clarity. Those memories threatened to pull me back into the depths of despair, but I confronted them head-on. I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my sorrow and anger, pouring those turbulent emotions onto paper. Each journal entry became a battle cry against the darkness that once consumed me, a declaration that I would not let the past dictate my future. As autumn yielded to winter, the landscape outside transformed into a stark reminder of the inevitability of change. The barren trees and frost-covered mornings mirrored the inner desolation I had known, yet they also signaled the promise of renewal. Just as nature shed its old leaves to embrace a fresh start, I recognized that I too must let go of the remnants of a past that no longer served me. I began to distance myself from the familiar places that once symbolized our shared life, avoiding the cafe where we laughed over coffee, the park bench where we once dreamed together, so that I might focus on carving out a new path forward. Amid these internal struggles, an unexpected impulse began to take shape, a desire to confront Rebecca and seek the closure I so desperately needed. The idea of meeting her, of looking into her eyes and demanding the truth behind her betrayals, both terrified and tempted me. I wrestled with the thought, wondering whether reopening old wounds might grant me the final liberation I sought, or if it would only deepen the scars already etched into my heart. In the quiet moments of solitary reflection, I weighed the risks and the potential benefits, coming to understand that true strength might lie in facing the pain directly rather than burying it under layers of denial. The notion of a confrontation grew stronger with each passing day. I began to rehearse the words I would say, not with the intent to wound, but to reclaim the narrative of my life. I drafted lines that spoke of betrayal, of shattered dreams, and of the hope that now flickered within me, a hope that even the darkest past could be transcended. The pages of my journal transformed into a repository of my resolve, each written word reinforcing my determination to confront my past and, ultimately, free myself from its hold. As the day of reckoning drew near, I prepared myself for the inevitable meeting. I reached out to Rebecca with a simple, direct invitation to talk, no grand speeches, no dramatic ultimatums, just an honest request for a conversation in a neutral space. I hoped that such a meeting might offer us both some measure of clarity, even if it meant facing truths too painful to ignore. In that act of reaching out, I reclaimed a fragment of the power that had been stolen from me, reaffirming that I was now an active participant in my own redemption. The days that followed were filled with a tumult of emotions, a blend of fear, sorrow, and a hard-earned optimism. I focused on the lessons of my journey, recalling the small victories that had come from confronting my inner demons. I reminded myself that healing was not linear, that setbacks were part of the process, and that each step, no matter how tentative, was a step toward reclaiming my life. The memory of Rebecca's betrayal would always be a part of me, but it would no longer be the measure of my worth. On a cold, overcast afternoon, I found myself walking toward the cafe where we had agreed to meet, a place that had once been a sanctuary of shared joy but now stood as the stage for our final reckoning. With every step, a mixture of dread and determination surged through me, for I knew that the encounter could change everything. I was not seeking to rekindle the past or even to punish her, I was simply ready to face the truth and to speak my truth, no matter how painful it might be. Crossing the threshold of the cafe, I sensed that the fires of reckoning had been fully ignited. In that charged moment, I was prepared to confront not only Rebecca, but also the ghost of our shared past, a past filled with both tender moments and deep betrayals. I vowed to speak with a clarity that came from the depths of my own suffering and rebirth, to express the anguish, the anger, and ultimately, the hope that had emerged from the ashes of our broken bond. As I waited for her arrival, my heart pounded with a blend of anticipation and sorrow. I knew that the conversation would be a turning point, a final chapter in the long saga of our shared history. The confrontation was not about assigning blame or seeking vengeance, but about reclaiming the narrative of my own life and asserting that I was more than the sum of my scars. In that moment, I realized that the true fire of reckoning was not one that sought to destroy, but one that had the power to purify and transform. When Rebecca finally arrived, our eyes met, and in that silent exchange lay the unspoken acknowledgement of all that had transpired. I was ready to embrace the truth, to let the flames of our past consume the remnants of deceit, and to step boldly into a future where I could finally claim my own destiny. The encounter promised to be the culmination of months of inner turmoil, a moment of clarity in which I would finally assert my right to move forward, unburdened by the weight of betrayal. And so, as the conversation began, I felt the last vestiges of my old self melt away, replaced by a newfound strength and resolve. I was no longer the man who had been defined by loss and heartbreak. I was a man reborn, ready to face whatever truths lay ahead, and determined to let the fires of reckoning illuminate a path toward redemption. I awoke to a bitter winter morning, the chill in the air mirroring the cold finality that had been building inside me. After months of inner struggle and fleeting moments of reconciliation with my own pain, I knew that the time had come to sever the last remaining ties. The confrontation with Rebecca was inevitable, an ultimate reckoning that would force both of us to face the consequences of our choices. That morning, I prepared myself with a resolve that had taken root over countless solitary walks and quiet reflections. I dressed in my worn jacket and left the remnants of the life I once shared behind me. Each step I took toward the door was a step away from memories, from the ghost of the woman who had once promised me forever. Today, I would confront Rebecca not as the man who had loved her blindly, but as someone who had been forged anew in the fires of betrayal and loss. Driving through the empty streets, I recalled the last conversation we had shared, a conversation marked by veiled threats and desperate attempts at reconciliation that had only deepened the chasm between us. The bitterness in my heart had grown too heavy to ignore, and now it surged to the surface with every mile. I parked outside the modest cafe where we had agreed to meet, a place that had once symbolized the warmth of our shared dreams but now stood as a stage for our final act. When I entered the cafe, the atmosphere was subdued and tense. Rebecca was already there, her eyes avoiding mine as she sipped a cup of tea. The sight of her, so familiar yet altered by distance and remorse, stirred a torrent of conflicting emotions within me. I approached our table slowly, each step echoing the heartbeat of a man who had nothing left to lose. "Rebecca," I said, my voice low and measured, "we need to talk. There's no more room for pretense between us." She looked up, her expression a blend of sadness and resignation. "I know, Michael. I've been waiting for this conversation, though part of me hoped it might never come." I took a deep breath, struggling to steady the tumultuous mix of anger and sorrow. All these months of apologies, of promises to change, none of it has erased the betrayal. I've spent nights wrestling with the truth, trying to understand how everything we built could be undone by one act of deception. Her eyes glistened, but there was no trace of the woman I once adored. I was wrong, she whispered, as if the admission itself could mend what was broken. I never meant to hurt you, Michael. I lost myself, and I made choices I now regret. The weight of her words crashed over me like a tidal wave. Regret, I realized, was a luxury I could no longer afford. Hurt me? I repeated bitterly. You shattered my trust, my very sense of who I am. I tried to forgive, to heal, but every time I looked at you, I saw the lies. Every memory was tainted by your betrayal. Silence fell between us, heavy and suffocating. I recalled the nights of restless pacing, the endless replays of messages and whispered secrets that tore at the fabric of my soul. I remembered the slow disintegration of a love that had once been my sanctuary. I gave everything to us, I continued, voice trembling with pent-up anger. I believed in you, in us, and you threw it all away for a fleeting moment of excitement, a moment that meant nothing compared to the lifetime we were supposed to share. Rebecca's eyes darted away, unable to meet the fierce intensity of my gaze. I'm sorry, she repeated, her voice barely audible. I thought I could fix things, that maybe we could start over, but I see now that the damage is irreparable. Those simple words, so laden with regret, sealed the fate of what remained between us. In that moment, I realized that reconciliation was nothing more than a desperate fantasy. The man who had once seen only love in her eyes now recognized only the reflection of deceit and cowardice. No, I said firmly. I can't pretend that everything is okay. You have taken away my ability to trust, to believe in us. I'm done trying to salvage what's already drowned in lies. The cafe fell silent as my declaration reverberated through the space. Rebecca's face crumpled, a mixture of anguish and helplessness contorting her features. Michael, please. I never meant to. Save it, I interrupted sharply. I've heard enough excuses. The pain you caused is permanent, and I refuse to live in a constant state of regret and anger. I've spent too long in the shadows of your betrayal, and I'm stepping into the light of a new beginning, a beginning without you. Her eyes, once filled with the promise of love, now held only tears and a silent plea. But I love you, she whispered, as if those 3 words could undo the years of hurt. I shook my head slowly, the finality of the moment anchoring my resolve. Love? If that is love, then it is as empty as the promises you made. I don't recognize it anymore, and I can't accept it. I want nothing more to do with the person who betrayed me, not in this life nor in any future that I dare to dream. The finality in my tone left no room for negotiation. As the last remnants of our shared past dissolved into bitter silence, I stood up from the table. I gathered my coat with deliberate calm and turned to leave, my heart pounding with a mix of sorrow and liberation. In that instant, I realized that the hostile breakup was not just an end, but the necessary birth of a future where I could rebuild myself without the constant reminder of a love turned toxic. At the door, I paused and looked back one last time. Rebecca's eyes were red, her expression one of utter defeat. The confrontation had stripped away any pretense, revealing a raw truth that neither of us could escape. Goodbye, Rebecca, I said quietly, though each word was laced with the bitterness of betrayal and the resolute finality of my decision. This is the end. And with that, I stepped out into the cold, unforgiving world, leaving behind the remnants of a life that had once promised everything but delivered only heartache. The hostile breakup was complete, a final severing of ties that marked the end of one chapter and the uncertain beginning of another. In that decisive moment, I knew that I would carry the scars of this betrayal forever, yet I would also carry the strength to forge a new identity, free from the shadows of our shared past.